Welcome everyone to our online information and support session. John Lennon wrote that there are two motivating forces, fear and love. When we're afraid, we pull back from life. But when we are in love, we open to all that life offers with passion, excitement, and acceptance. My name is Kathleen Helgeson, and I'm the coordinator of the Patient and Family Resource Center. And I'm joined today by Rob Rutledge, radiation oncologist and the co-author of Healing and Cancer, who is going to be helping us manage fears of cancer reoccurrence in order to open to life more fully. We are very pleased to offer this session with the generous funding support of the Cancer Care Manitoba Foundation. I'd also like to acknowledge that we're meeting today from all regions of Manitoba, the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, Ojibwe, and Dene people, as well as the homeland of the Métis Nation. It's very important for us to foster inclusivity and reconciliation and encourage others to do the same. Before we continue, there are just a few basic Zoom features that I'd like to explain. You'll notice as an attendee that your microphone and your audio are turned off, or your video are turned off as well. If you have a question for Rob at any time during his presentation, just click on the Q&A icon on your screen and type your question. You can also send that question anonymously by checking the Send Anonymously box before you click on the blue arrow to send. So my coworker Ellie is here off screen, and she's going to be helping us manage your questions as they come in. If you have a technical concern, you can also ask Ellie by typing that question into the Q&A, and she will answer your question privately and try to assist you. Our guest speaker, Rob Rutledge, is a radiation oncologist, and aside from his private or his oncology practice, he has also created the Healing and Cancer Foundation and is the co-author of the book Healing and Cancer. He has spent his life, his life's work, helping patients maximize their chances of recovery and healing. He is also an associate professor in the Faculty of Medicine at Dalhousie University and joins us today from Halifax. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you so much, Kathleen and Ali in the background. It's wonderful to be here, and huge thanks to Cancer Care Manitoba addressing this very important topic of fear of cancer recurrence. So thank you.
Yeah, we're very pleased to have you here and excited for this conversation that we're going to have today. And first of all, I'd like to just check in with our audience and ask them what their hopes and expectations are for today's webinar. So you'll notice that right now that I'm going to send a poll to your screen, and there's questions related to what your goal is for this session. You can check all that apply to you. Now, if you're not seeing a poll come up on your screen, you can certainly send a comment in the Q&A to Ellie, and she will just relay it to us. So we're just getting some votes coming in now. And Rob, just while we're waiting, I might add or mention to our audience that it was a year ago that you had planned and generously offered to come to Winnipeg to do this presentation in person. And we're really happy that you can join us online today. And it's been a long-awaited presentation for us. So
yeah, well, hats off to each and every one of the participants. I know people are voting right now, but the fact that they showed up and willing to actually address their fear of recurrence actually diminishes the influence that fear of recurrence has on us. So it's a bit paradoxical that we go into this kind of uncomfortable topic, but by doing that work, you can actually feel better, happier, stronger, and let's go to the poll and we'll find out what they actually would like to get from this.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm going to share the results now to your poll, and Rob, can you see that now?
Yeah, it's interesting that it's really kind of spread out evenly, right? And so what I would say is, if you do any of this kind of psychological work, you delve into what's really pushing the buttons there, that actually has an influence on all aspects of your health. You physically can get stronger. It's less of a stress reaction. You're happier. Your brain works better. You function better, connect better with other people, and therefore you live your life more fully. So no matter what your intention is here, you can have a profound influence in all aspects of your health.
Rob, for yourself personally, what's your hope that people can take away from this session today?
Well, I'm just gonna kind of minimize my polls here. Have we shared results yet?
Yes, I did.
We did. Okay, good. So great. So first of all, I want to normalize this for people, right? That having cancer provokes oftentimes a fear of recurrence, and that's normal, that's natural, and that we can use that energy of our anxiety to actually be proactive and take care of ourselves. So first of all, I want to say it's normal and natural. We don't have to fight against that natural inclination. At the same time, I want to talk about this idea that there are ways you can actually address when those fears come up. You know, when you're feeling lousy, there are techniques, there's science, there's methodology that says you can actually feel better. You can actually recover from this. And if it's okay, Kathleen, I just wanted to read a little quote from a woman who has a breast cancer diagnosis. And she's talking about the fear of recurrence. She said, "The fear of recurrence is like a whale that moves into your living room. Over time, the whale gets smaller, but never quite goes away completely. A tenant you can't get rid of. Maybe it gets down to the size of a magazine rack. Once in a while, you bump into it. Sometimes it swells up again in your face, like when you have to go for another test and so on." And so what I want to do in this next hour or so is to talk about how is it that you can shrink the whale in your living room. And if the whale kind of suddenly bloats up again, how is it you can kind of settle that one down as well? So a very practical, pragmatic way to address the fear of cancer recurrence.
That's great. Yeah, we're really looking forward to this, and also, hoping that that patients and families that are tuning in today know that Patient Family Support Services here at Cancer Care offers counseling and support groups and programs, as well as the literature here in the library. So please know that those supports are available for you.
Great. And let me just share a screen so we can actually share the phone number, because it's super important. So the anxiety is normal, first of all, and we can harness it. You can lessen your anxiety. And then lastly, you talked about the services you offer within Manitoba. It's so important. You know, when that whale gets too big and you need some extra support, you need to chat with a professional, then you can phone that number, connect with the professionals. It's not a weakness. It's actually a great strength to be so proactive. So I encourage that. And maybe I'll just flash a couple more slides just to kind of set the context here as well.
Great.
So we're going to talk about a little bit of the background, but really I want to work towards understanding your brain and how your brain works and how you can decrease your anxiety or your fear levels by doing these proactive things, even in the midst of it. Reframing difficult thoughts is another skill we'll learn. So it's really, I want people to walk away with some skills from today. And also I want to put this within the context of what I believe in is complete cancer care or integrative oncology. So it's getting the best of the medical system with what you can do to empower yourself at levels of body, mind, and spirit. And it's that marriage of those two that can really help both the emotional side and your physical outcome, right? The chance of regression of cancer, or cure of cancer. So those two together. But if you're so fearful that you can't really do those things, then it makes it more difficult. So that's why we talk about this within the context of empowering yourself with information, getting the best care from the medical system. And then there's the empowerment piece that we'll be definitely talking about shortly.
Rob, when did you first notice that fear of recurrence was a common problem with the patients that you worked with?
Well, right from, Jesus, like 30 plus years now, from medical school right into residency. And I just want to take people through a kind of typical trajectory, because I see people oftentimes at the time of their diagnosis. And for almost everybody, it's an extremely stressful time with like a decision that has to be made, trying to understand what's happening, the effect of the cancer on their lives and their loved ones. There's a lot happening. And so you really would think fear of cancer recurrence is extremely high at that point in time. And then generally speaking, over time, it kind of goes down and down and down. And it took me a while to understand that there are particular triggers. It's not like it's just a smooth curve. There are times when we have more flares. And one of them is at the end of treatment. I call it the end of treatment meltdown. People have been kind of holding themselves strong for everybody else, the medical system taking care of them. And suddenly the treatments are finished and it's like, oh, what do I do now? And it's a very stressful time for a lot of people, right? But then there's the anniversary date, there's scanxiety. this idea that, you have a scan booked and you're going to go talk to your doctor about your scan results. And this is so typical, like about a week beforehand, the anxiety goes up, it peaks around that time. You get the good news, scan's good. And then it takes about a week to 2 to 3 weeks to settle down again. So I'm telling you all these things just to say it's normal and natural to have these fear of cancer recurrence. And even 10 years later, on average, 1 in 3 people are still working with their fear of anxiety. They could be completely cured of their cancer, but the kind of fear is there. And so the idea is to be able to say that's normal, that's natural, that's what happens to people. And then how do we work with it? How do we figure out how to make the best of the fears when they come up, or how do we minimize the fears from coming up in the first place?
Rob, for you personally, why was it important for you to acknowledge this emotional aspect of cancer in your work as an oncologist?
I've really been on a 30-year journey of trying to figure out how people can really empower themselves, how they can do really, really well in the long term. And I became a little bit more fascinated about the remarkable cancer survivors, or people have undergone spontaneous remission. There were certain qualities and certain attributes and attitudes and actions that the people that do really, really well, manifest on the day-to-day. And one of them was to work on the emotional issues, right? And so if there was stress, if there was fear, if there was anxiety, they would actually do the work and try to understand what's happening there and why is it happening. And so they can kind of settle that down. And even if you think of it from a very basic perspective, if you're in that kind of stressed, anxious state and you're kind of walking through life like this all the time, that depletes the natural capacity within the system to kind of heal itself. And so if we can live our lives in a more calm, peaceful, loving, connecting state, then that allows our bodies to heal more easily and allows us to enjoy our relationships, et cetera, et cetera. So really you can't separate the kind of physical care from taking care of yourself at the emotional level.
Yeah. Rob, there's a question from one of our audience members that asked, why do you think cancer has more of an impact compared to other medical conditions in terms of the anxiety that it might create for people?
I was listening to a YouTube talk, excellent talk from an American psychiatrist in preparation for this. And if you look at the other diseases like heart disease, arthritis, all diabetes, all these things, everybody is suffering the same thing. They have the same fear that their condition will actually get worse. And I think we may have just a bit more understanding within the cancer world that this is normal and natural. So we don't hear about the people with arthritis suffering the emotional side effects, but we know within the cancer world, because it affects everybody, that we're going to have these anxieties. So the data says it's actually very similar to regardless of condition. Yeah, great question.
Has there been any specific influences in your own life that have really helped shaped your career for you?
Well, I became very interested as a medical student. I didn't know if I wanted to be a psychiatrist or work with people affected by addictions. And the book fell on my lap, and it was called Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Dr. Bernie Siegel. And Bernie's a cancer surgeon. And I knew from that moment, he was talking about his exceptional cancer patients, the people that did incredibly well. And I kind of knew within my heart that I really wanted to do that. I wanted to run support groups and so on. And so I've just been fascinated. And then, it's just been an amazing ride, because just think of the brain science that's happened in the last 10 years and the issues around quality of life. And so we now have kind of scientific proof or mechanisms that explain the kind of spirit, mind, body connection. And so it's really been fun for me. And I've just kind of fulfilled my journey of that medical students from 30 years ago that, I really, 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 really wanted to do this. So, yeah.
Great. Well, we're glad that you have.
Thank you. Thanks. And thanks everyone for being here as well. I really appreciate and hats off to all the audience members now.
So Rob, you mentioned about the science of the kind of the neuroscience that's been happening and in terms of understanding a little bit more of the role of the brain in our healing process and that.
Yeah, and maybe I'll share some slides
Sure.
now to talk about the idea. If we can understand this, then it normalizes it, and you can actually do a lot to kind of help yourself as well. So, but
Oh, I
before we
forgot.
do
Yeah,
that,
before we do that.
so one of the really important concepts, and it boils back down to your John Lennon comment, and that quote is that we actually have a choice as to how we want to respond to the world, right? The outside world is always going to be providing us challenges, but how we respond is our choice. And if we focus on choosing to live in this more proactive, positive, loving state, it has a different physiology within the brain that innervates the rest of the body, that helps the body heal itself. And what I've noticed about the remarkable cancer survivors, the people that do exceptionally well, is they no longer focus their energy on the things they can't control. They put their energy on the things they can control, which is essentially their response and their attitude and their relationships and whatever is most important to them, right? Expressing joy and gratitude in the world, whatever you as a person value, you decide to focus there. And so I understand it's the same thing with the science, positive psychology. Again, people who are happiest choose to focus on happiness. And so I like to develop a ritual that I use in 3 different circumstances to set my intention to be my best self. So first thing in the morning, I meditate for kind of mindfulness meditation for about 15 minutes, which we'll talk about later on. And then kind of put my hands up, and it's like a secular prayer. Please help me. Please let me be loving. Please let me be helpful. Bring my best self in the world. So I'm praying hard. And then I kind of do my little prostration, which is kind of submit to that I can't control things, that I just want to be my best self type thing. And so that's a ritual for me to remember what's most important. So as a ritual, could be in the morning, could be at night. And then going into a difficult situation, right? So you're about to go into a medical appointment. You're about to talk to your doctor, and what do you want to be in that appointment? You want to be clear thinking. You want to advocate for yourself. You want to be your best self so you can actually absorb the information and have a good conversation, right? So you set your intention in that moment to get the best care for yourself. Or if you're in the midst of it, you're in a chaotic situation, maybe you're in a bit of an argument, or you're in the middle of the stress of life, you can also set your intention at that point to come back home to be your best self. And so there's this opportunity to keep practicing that muscle of whatever is most important for you. So I'll show just the kind of points of the slide here, and then I'll ask that we all just do a little 2-3 minutes of a setting of an intention ourselves. So in preparation, asking yourself, how is it you want to be in this world? Or what is your best self is the other way to say that. What do you hope of yourself? And then you can do it in those 3 circumstances. So folks, if you want to, you participate in a way that feels best for you, but come to a place where you're sitting such that you've got a kind of strong, upright posture. You're taking your place. And I'm just going to do a little chime to start the exercise. And bring your attention, we'll do the mindfulness first, bring your attention to the feeling of being connected to your feet and the floor. So you're grounding yourself, you're bringing your energy into your body. Bring your attention to your hands and the weight of the hands and the knees. Bring your attention to your backbone, right? That solid physicality, the physicality that's right in the middle of your spine. Bring your attention now to the front of your chest. Just mindfulness. What do you feel there? What do you experience there? Could be a sense of openness or warmth, maybe vulnerability, heartfulness. And that's our humanness. We have a strong, solid spine, and we have an open, warm heart. Bring your attention now to your breath. Be very curious. What does it feel like to breathe? What are the sensations of breathing? And And allow yourself to settle, allow yourself to relax into the experience of breathing. Now we'll set this into a visualization. Take a slightly larger in-breath. And on the out-breath, longer, slower, smoother. So imagine breathing in a sense of calm and peace. And on the out-breath, release, relax, let go. Very nice. So inviting a sense of calm and peace. And in the out-breath, simply release any sense of tension or stress. Very nice. So you're setting yourself up for a relaxation response. And let's extend the visualization now. Allow your heart to warm with a sense of caring and compassion. Allow yourself to feel the emotions of connection. And it's often easiest to bring to mind somebody that you deeply love, or your pet, or at a different time in your life when you're really connected, maybe a grandparent or a parent, or maybe when your kids were young. And allows your heart to warm. Warmth, like the element on a stove, warming, radiating, healing energy. Now bring to mind somebody in your life who's suffering in some way or form. It might be somebody close to you, might be somebody you know from a distance. And naturally your heart opens again. So you think of that person, allow your heart to warm and send that healing energy to them. Like an aspiration, a prayer that they may find healing. They may find peace in their journey. Just let your heart open like the sunshine, warmth, radiant. Now bring to mind the other people in your life that you are close to. So it could be your friends, your family, different time in your life if you want to. Just allow that sense of warmth and care to extend out to all your family and friends and cherished colleagues. And send that same sense of healing energy to everybody everywhere who's suffering in any way or form. So it could be somebody who has COVID, it could be the healthcare workers, could be other people with cancer diagnosis. Imagine like you're a beacon of life and you're just shining your light. It's infinite healing energy. Now recognize when you're doing that, that same healing energy is permeating through your own body. You can actually direct that sense of compassion, caring towards yourself, radiating in all directions, like your skin pores or little beams of light going outwards. You can send that same healing energy into your emotional life, into your psyche, to your spirit. And in that state of openness, set an intention for yourself. How is it that you want to be in this world? How is it that you can be your best self? How is it that you want to manifest your spirit? And let it be so. And then just bring your attention back to your sitting posture, feeling a sense that your feet connected with the earth, you're grounded in your body, you're open to a sense of healing, transformation, and that your good human heart connects it to the physicality as well as the wonderful spirit that you are.
Thank you, Rob. That was lovely.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, do you know, it's maybe 3 or 4 minutes doing that. You actually change the physiology of your body. And probably more importantly, you remember what's most important to you, right? Mm-hmm. How is it that I want to be in this world? How do I want to respond? Same outward circumstance. You're in this more grounded, compassionate, care place. In fact, your brain works better when you're in that space.
Definitely.
Which I think is the next slide. Okay, so this is the hand model of the brain, and maybe I'll just stop share just for 2 secs. It might be easiest to just to show it with my hand.
Mm.
So through evolution, we start out with very primitive nervous systems 650 million years ago. And the wrist here represents the spinal cord. And the first part of the nervous system to develop was essentially the reptilian brain. This is the fight or flight part of the brain. It simply withdraws you from danger, right? So that has its place within our life. The next part of our brain is actually the rest of the thumb, called the limbic system. And this is the approach system. It's the reward system. I kind of generalize this kind of bit more irritable brain, your kind of stress brain. And then through evolution, the last part of our brain is where we have a lot of machinery up front in the frontal lobes here. And I call this the wise and compassionate part of the brain. And essentially throughout the day, you're like, I'm stressed, I'm flustered, I'm upset. And then you kind of come back home to your best self again. Okay, I can handle this, one thing at a time. You're thinking clearly, et cetera, et cetera. And you flash again, I'm stressed. And so back and forth goes your brain every day, essentially. And what we're trying to do is minimize the time that you kind of flip your lid and maximize the time that you actually are living, thinking out of your wise and compassionate brain. So that's the kind of idea of this whole thing is when you're stressed and fear of recurrence comes up, you're not thinking clearly, you're not feeling good, your system's not running well, and you come back home again, I can handle this one step at a time. So that's the science.
And you mentioned you had mentioned just earlier about the more in I guess our recent times, like the neuroscience and the study of the brain and the connection with brain and emotions. And do you believe that can be really helpful for patients to understand a little bit more about how the brain works?
Yes. Yeah. Well, the fact is there's something called neuroplasticity, which essentially means that your brain gets better and better and better at whatever you practice. So you've practiced being flustered, upset, anxious, your brain will get good at that. If you practice being more calm, clear thinking, your brain gets better at that. And so the brain is the organ that changes itself. And so there's a huge opportunity then to actually capitalize on that. And then you can use the science, which I'm about to explain, to actually change your brain. By doing these things, your brain actually grows more neurocircuitry. You get better and stronger. Like a muscle, you get stronger and stronger and stronger at living part of your frontal lobe. Takes practice, but this is the power of this presentation right now, is that you actually get to learn how to do that.
Great.
So I'm just going to show a couple more slides. So we flip back and forth. Let's stay in our wise and compassionate brain. You're happier. You enjoy being in the wise, compassionate brain much more. So Kathleen, you and I are going to have a little bit of a conversation then to think, well, our brain is here. How do we make this brain work better? And the same, I would ask you, Kathleen, if your car was starting to, have problems, what would you do? How do you keep your car running better?
Right. Just the maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Paying attention.
Paying attention, putting
asking
gas
somebody.
into.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So it's like your brain is like a car. You want to run it well. So we set up the conditions so that you can be happier, you can be stronger. Okay, so I think of it in two ways. The first way I think about it is, how is it that you can just kind of generally be in a more positive, clear thinking state? How is it you can kind of get your brain to be there? So Kathleen, what are some of the healthy habits that we can do that actually help our brains function better?
Well,
number one.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I think the breath is it's fundamental to everything, because I as you mentioned earlier, when we calm ourselves through the breath, then all things are possible that weren't possible when we were breathing rapidly. So, and I mean, that's, teaching and practicing yoga, that's been a big part of my life, as well as meditation. So those things have been really helpful. And I know they're not for everybody, but I think the breath, as long as you can breathe, then you have that available.
That option, right?
to you.
With the breath, we're going to talk about how that gets you back into brain or space. What is the number one health exercise that we can all do that really helps with brain function? Number one exercise, just generally speaking.
I don't know. It's a test.
It is exercise. I can put you on the spot, which partly is yoga as well, right? So, so actually, while we're here, why don't we just stand up? We've had 20 minutes of talk so far, and if you guys can just get up and on the spot and just like shake a little bit. Oh yeah, shake, 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 shake it out. Sometimes when you're feeling stressed and anxious, it's good to kind of let out those tensions, and you can stretch a little bit. Whatever your body needs right now, just to make it feel good again. 10 minutes every hour, we should at least be getting up and so on. So you guys can come back to sitting here. And Kathleen, I'm sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot yet again. How much exercise should we be getting?
Oh, well, I know this answer because we just had a presentation on exercise. So I believe it's 150 minutes of moderate exercise a week.
Yes, right. So you kind of slightly shorter breath. What do you do in the time of COVID? What are some of the little tricks of the trade that can get you to do some of this?
Well, I mean, for myself personally, it's been walking. So for the last year, I've really taken up walking on a daily basis, which has been really nice. And a lot of people that I've spoken to have also been walking a lot more and getting outside. And our physiotherapist that did her presentation talked about, just the availability of videos that are online and resources that are there for people.
Yeah. So the videos are there, like YouTube videos. I would say dance is like a really easy one. Like choose a dance song from your youth that you really like. So even like 3 minutes, 5 minutes at a time, you just get going. Doesn't matter what you look like or how you do, just do it. So good for you. So exercise, when we exercise, we actually release brain-derived growth factor that helps our brains learn and grow and remember. Look, I could rant for half an hour on exercise, but we're not going to go there for now. Just to say that, you feel anxious and stressed sometimes. When you exercise, you channel your energy into something that's really very helpful in terms of all aspects of your health. It's like you're setting a meta message to say, I want to get better. I want to get stronger. So exercise to me is like a number one on the list. Okay. So what else can you do in terms of healthy habits, Kathleen, that actually change how your brain functions?
I would say sleep.
On the day-to-day.
I would say sleep and eating well are two big things as well.
Perfect. Why don't we go to diet next? And so how would you describe a healthy diet? What are the kind of components?
Well, I think that eating what your body needs for fuel and knowing how your body feels when you eat certain foods is really important. I think that we all intuitively know what makes us feel energized and feel good. So yeah, I would be paying attention to that and just the guidelines that our nutritionists set out too, just based on, more fruit and vegetables and maybe higher protein than what we might think we need and lots of water.
Well done. Wow.
I passed.
That's no, that was like 100%, 110%. That's excellent. So a couple of things I'll think about. First of all, there's something called a low glycemic diet. And so the idea is not to have the spikes in the sugar, right? So you don't want the sugary processed foods because that sugar gets into your bloodstream really quickly. And then you bottom out because it tries to compensate. And then when your blood sugar is low, you get the hangries, which is, I just want to eat something and you can't think as clearly. So by eating that protein, a little bit of protein, the veggies that Kathleen's talking about, you get this kind of nice slow burn, et cetera, et cetera. Diet is a huge, there's anti-inflammatory aspects of diet. And that's why, a vegetable-based diet, I think is really important as well. And again, we could spend 20 minutes just on diet, but it is yet another way that you can influence how your brain works on the day-to-day. And I really love it. You started out with mindfulness, what works for you. I would always say, ask an expert, like get expert advice. It's super important. So diet, you said a really important one as well, sleep. How is it that you set yourself up to have a good night's sleep? What are some of the kind of what they call sleep hygiene principles?
Yeah, I think, there again, we hear a lot about not using electronics before bed and staying off your phones and not having these things in the bedroom. And I believe that that's really important. And, and saving the bedroom for sleep as a priority area.
Yeah. Agreed. So it's not only do you try to avoid the things that are causing too much stim. So any type of screen time within that last hour or so is going to give the blue light, which kind of keeps your brain awake type thing. So read a paper book might be one of the ideas around that. But there's also this idea of routine. So you're kind of setting yourself up at the same time. The lights are getting dimmer as it's going on. Again, I'm telling you these things because each and every one of you can do that research and try to figure this out. Start to read around it, start to figure out how you can facilitate a better night's sleep. Because as you say, if you're tired, you're getting the stress reaction, right? What do you do at 3 a.m., Kathleen, when you wake up? I've got this presentation tomorrow and Rutledge is not prepared. And you're catastrophizing. What do you do at 3 a.m., insomnia?
I think, I would go first to my breath and try to slow my breath down and try to focus on my breath. And that doesn't always work, though. I mean, even with as much practice as you can get, like it's still sometimes your mind is just jumping around and it's really hard. And that I think is the key, though, is to slow the breath down, to slow the mind down. If you slow the breath, you slow the mind. And I think for some people, they do maybe get out of bed at that point and maybe go into another room or begin, maybe do some reading. Personally, I just try to stay in bed because I feel my chances of falling back to sleep are better that way. But I think everybody, again, sort of knows themselves what works for them.
Yeah. And there's two kind of schools of thought. One is just like you said, the bed is the where you sleep type thing. And so if you're not sleeping, don't stay in the bed. So, and there's a whole kind of science around cognitive based, insomnia therapy and so on. But I actually do what you do. First of all, I do the body up. I relax my body through a breathing technique, and hopefully that relaxes my mind and helps me get back to sleep. And then secondly, I just put up with the boredom. So I know I'm going to be awake for the hour and a half, but I stay in the dark because even 90 seconds of bright light suppresses melatonin and other really important sleep hormones that are released at night. So anyways, stay in the dark is one of the principles around that. And again, this is probably about a 15-minute talk just on sleep itself. So another way that people can help themselves. Now you also said breath. And so I'm going to expand that to practicing a relaxation technique, right? So when for instance, we just did a little bit of meditation, mindfulness meditation, bringing your attention to your breath and your body and so on. And when you do that, it's actually the left prefrontal lobe that gets kind of thicker and stronger. And this is the kind of positive side of your brain. So the right side is a little bit more on the negative motions. The left side is more of the kind of positive motion. So you're thickening that left prefrontal lobe. And you also notice the relative anatomy. So the frontal lobe here is overlying, or what they call dampening, the stressed, irritable brain. So when we practice meditation, it ends up giving us emotional regulation. It ends up helping us pay attention, because that's super important. Paying attention to the here and now is actually where life is actually happening. So you want to do that as well. And lastly, that left prefrontal lobe allows that kind of creative, moral, compassionate self. So this is the wise and compassionate brain. So by practicing that, you actually feel better on the day-to-day. It's what I call resetting your stressometer, right? So I was talking about if you're anxious all the time, you're kind of feeling like this. If you practice a relaxation technique, you're in the same space. Life is still offering you the same challenges, but you're making a better decision and you're feeling better with that.
There is a question I just want to ask before we move on
Sure.
about calming the mind through watching maybe a TV show that helps you to distract you away from the things that are troubling you. And I mean, I know myself too that, it's sometimes watching a comedy or even just a good story can help pull you out of your head. And
agreed. So I think that really it's nice to have a balance within one's life, right? So a lot of these techniques that I'm talking about do take some time, right? So we're talking about a half an hour of exercise per day. We're talking about practicing a relaxation technique for 15 minutes per day. We're going to talk about some other techniques as well. And if you put in that hard work, and if you are able to kind of slowly work at changing your brain over, I think that will be most helpful. And then life is also about enjoying, right? Experiencing joy and the wonder of good story of a fun TV show. And so to give yourself that kind of break from kind of the day to day, I think is great, but all within balance. I guess the takeaway, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, is not to kind of be in the kind of social media world, which really kind of irritates the stress pathways. So enjoy, and each to his own. How does it make you feel? How do you feel the next day? How do you feel a week after that? So
Yeah,
okay.
one of our audience members mentioned that they still have difficulty even with taking melatonin and some sleepy time tea. And I think just all these measures are really good to try. And like you
Yes.
said, people will figure out what works for them, and trying to multiple, little rituals before bed.
Yes.
There's no
Yes.
magic cure, right?
Yes. No, there's not. And
Yeah.
we're not saying this is going to guarantee you a good night's sleep. It's like facilitating the best sleep that can happen for you in that circumstance. And again, to get professional advice. And I'd also say I'm a professional napper, and so I recommend a nap for 10 or 15 minutes, in the afternoon. So there's lots to be had here. I just want to just quickly go through some of the other habits. So there's the dietary part of it, the sleep, practicing a relaxation technique. Touch is healing, right? So we are human beings with a human physiology. In fact, you can just touch the top of your hand right now, or touch your cheeks right now, your forehead, just like that's very nice for yourself, right? So you can soothe yourself. Releasing that oxytocin can set that sense of calming. And lastly, we have this idea, and sometimes it's the TV show that nourishes your soul for certain, during time of COVID especially. But Kathleen talked about getting into nature. So nurturing yourself, feeding that part of your spirit that enjoys it. Do you have the poll on where
I
people can
do.
have
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we'll just check in with our audience right now and ask you what kind of things that work for you to create a feeling of calm. So you'll see a poll come onto your screen now. And the question is just, what activities do you do to create a feeling of calm? And obviously some of the things that you do may not be reflected on this poll. And if they're not, feel free to share them in the Q&A with Allie, and she can relay them
Yeah.
to us.
Wow. Do as I guess I get to watch
You do.
the results before people actually come out there, but there's a nice balance. There's a really nice balance of the different activities.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, and as
Beautiful.
you said, I think just having a multitude of things to choose from, and staying open to possibilities of things that we
Yes.
haven't tried is also really
Yeah.
helpful.
The brain likes variety, and our brain
Mm.
also likes stability, right? And so
Yeah.
it's good to
Just
have the kind of foundations.
just a comment here before I close the poll, from one of our participants mentioned the arts, poetry and writing,
Mm,
music and painting. This is something that
nice.
wasn't on our list,
Nice.
but that's lovely.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to end the polling and then share the results with everyone. So hopefully you can see the results there.
Oh yeah, I'm very happy that the Manitobans are taking it seriously, their physical activity. Just like I was ranting and you guys delivered, so well done, guys. But really, it's each to his own, right? And you essentially you want to take loving kindness is also about deciding how you want to spend your energy. Like we all have a limited amount of energy each day, so how is it you want to spend that energy? What fulfills your soul? And so you nourish your soul in those ways at the same time as taking care of yourself. So
Yeah, that's great. I'll
that's
just
beautiful.
close that now. Yeah, nice to see.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I'll do the quick one. Is not only do we kind of nourish and get ourselves back into the wise, compassionate brain, but we also try to avoid the things that really irritate us and put us in the stress brain, right? And so, for instance, for me, I can't watch television news. I just find it too distressing, the images and so on. So I listen to CBC radio, keeps me in touch with what's happening in the world, but I'm staying away from news, unnecessary, upsetting of activities. Too much social media, I think, is people can is like too much stim. If you use social media to connect with other people, I think it's very, very helpful. Obviously, there are certain stimulants that we want to stay away from as well. So Okay. So far, what we've been talking about is this idea that we can set it up so that our brain is more likely to be in that calm, clear thinking, wise, and compassionate state. But we're all human. We all are going to run into circumstances that suddenly make us scared, right? And sudden anxieties. And so Kathleen and I are going to go through this exercise of trying to identify what is it that allows you to know that you're suddenly upset and stressed. Because without this component, you lose out on all the opportunity for the subsequent technique. So Kathleen, think of a time when you're really stressed, really flustered, really overwhelmed or angry. How is it that you knew that you were having a stress reaction if you just look at what was happening physically within your body?
Physically, for sure, the breath is very shallow.
Shallow, yeah, can get stuck in the upper chest as well.
Yeah.
Or big breaths come as hyperventilation. Yep. What else?
Yeah, rapid sweating, armpits.
Yes. Yes. You and me both right now.
And upset stomach for sure. Those
Right.
would be the
Acid
three.
stomach.
Yeah, those would
Three
be
biggies.
the three biggies probably.
A
Yeah.
lot of people say a pounding heart,
Oh,
right? They
that's
feel
true.
that kind of thumping change, or the muscles go into contraction, and that can come out as jitters or pain, headache, backache, and so on. Sweaty palms you got. Okay, so that's the physical cues. How would you describe yourself from an emotional perspective when you're in that scenario? What's the emotional response to stress?
I think emotionally it's probably fear,
Mm-hmm.
catastrophic thinking,
Mm-hmm.
worst case scenario thinking.
Yeah, just emotionally, just the emotions. How to describe the emotions?
Um, yeah, fearful,
Fear. Yeah.
probably irritated, a little bit
Yeah.
more short,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Irritable.
angrier, irritable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe sad if there's certain
Yes.
anxieties. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. So thank you. So you're touching on those. Sometimes we feel like we want to cry, or sometimes there's a dissociation, right? We turn it as like a numbness to our emotional energies, right? Sometimes that's the only cue that can let you know what's happening. Okay, so then how would you describe your thinking? Not what you think, but how you think.
Oh, the thinking is probably ruminating, dwelling on
Mm-hmm.
things, racing thoughts,
Yes. Yeah.
not very logical.
Right. Good for you. So again, sometimes it gets foggy because when you're like this, you don't have access to the logical part of your brain, and so you can't kind of put
Can't
things together
focus.
more easily.
No.
Get very narrow and fixated. You don't see the possibilities, and then you're describing the kind of hamster in the wheel scenario, kind of loops, and especially loops around the same thoughts. Okay, then you don't have to share exactly. But what do you think? What are the words and sentences? And think of it this way. If there was a magical computer program that could type out everything that you thought for 24/7 for a week, and you went back, yeah, if we're looking for a little blackmail opportunity here, if we went back and we read the transcript from that week, how would you know from the content, the words and sentences, okay, I was feeling really upset at that point?
There would be negative.
Right.
They would be negative and they would be angrier thoughts than I would
Yes.
want to
Yes.
acknowledge.
We'll share this with a very wide audience on YouTube right now. We won't talk about your boss.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
yeah, definitely negative, definitely angrier than I would. Yeah, than I would
Yeah.
let known to the
Otherwise.
world. Yeah, and yeah,
So think
probably
about it. Where does the finger get pointed?
not at me.
No. Okay, good. Okay. So that just to let you know that the finger can get pointed outwards, that person, those people, that institution, or the finger can actually get pointed inwards.
This is
I'm
true.
such an idiot. I'm inadequate. I can't believe I did that. Right. And sometimes it's like pointing at life in general.
Yeah,
The
that's
other
true.
thing is when I hear certain words in my mind, like when the swear word comes out, it's like ding for me. It's like, oh, I'm feeling really irritated right now. What's happening? Right. Or if we're labeling and making things very small. So
And judging. Yeah.
judging, yes. So look, this is
Myself
going to
or others.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm trying to normalize this. Like we're all doing this all the time. And it's okay. But if you can recognize, oh, I've really wound myself up, then you have the opportunity to actually decide to come back home to your wise and compassionate brain. So what do we do? So a couple things. And so I'm going to keep on just powering on in the teaching here. So when you recognize this or the stress, it's important to actually have a plan beforehand. It's important to know, okay, well, here's a technique I can use when I'm really flustered. So you kind of prepare yourself, because it's going to happen to all of us, probably even every day type thing. And one of the powerful things is to be mindful. As soon as you put yourself at the mindfulness, you actually pop yourself up into the frontal lobe. We're actually watching a bit more. It's like metacognition or observer consciousness, right? So you don't have to take it so personally, because you have that other part of yourself that's watching what's happening. If you can't talk yourself through it, and that's going to happen for most of you, you can't kind of talk yourself through at the moment. There's a couple of things we can do. We're going to practice a breathing technique together. We're going to do that now. But interesting here, this is what I call body up. You think typically there's a mind-body connection. There's also a body-mind connection. And so people who are listening right now, I want you to actually try this. I want you to slump back in your chair and have your kind of eyes looking downwards, and like relax your body here and pretend like you're chewing some gum. Okay, you can come out of that. While you were doing that, your brain was interpreting your body's posture to say, there's nothing at stake here that's really important, right? It's like, I would not be slumping over and chewing if I was stressed. And so the brain gets this, I'm okay feeling from it. So interestingly, it's there. Another one that's interesting is like, remember what it's like to feel good. So for instance, you and I are doing this presentation, and I could think to myself, if I could just get through the presentation, at the end of the presentation, I'll feel better. So just thinking that I'm going to be at the end of the presentation will allow me to feel better in the moment. It's actually not true for you and me right now, because I'm really enjoying this. But anyways, thinking about how when you will feel good will actually allow you to relax down. And lastly, this is the super important part, is generally speaking, there should be, if you can, find one wise person in your life who can just listen. You can just say, this is what my experience was. This is how I felt. These were my emotions, right? I'm using all the I statements there. I'm not wagging the finger at the other people. I'm saying, this is my experience. You don't have to correct me. You don't have to offer advice, et cetera, et cetera. So then thus the power of the Patient and Family Support Resources Center. Okay. All right, so we are going to do a technique right now together that is in the moment, thinking yourself in that kind of anxious scenario. In fact, I get you guys to stand up if you would. If you're watching this after the fact, you can still stand up and watch the computer screen. And you can imagine that you're in this difficult situation. You're suddenly stressed. 99.9% of the time, you actually have time to respond. So I want you to imagine that you can press the pause button on that situation. So you're in the midst of the situation, you press the pause button on your video, and the first thing that you do is become very curious of the physical sensations within your body. Like, what does that feel like? Right now, I want you to bring your mindfulness into your body. Where do you feel the tension? What does your breath feel like? Okay, next, 2 hands on the lower abdomen. And I want you to take 4 slow breaths. Bring your attention into your lower abdomen. So you're using mindfulness of breath as you slowly breathe. Now, longer, slower, smoother out breath. And lastly, then you can talk to yourself. I can get through this one step at a time. I can handle the situation. Okay, so come on back to your chair. I just want to repeat the teaching here, because this is really important. So you press the pause button. As soon as you do that and you become conscious or watching yourself, you actually are already going up into your frontal lobe. And you use that by doing something called proprioception, which is the ability to feel where your body is. So you watch your body, watch the sensations of the body. What that does is it cuts the catastrophizing, because it's your thoughts and worries about the future that are actually causing you to feel stressed. So you let go of those thoughts by becoming very curious of the body. When you do the 4 slow breaths, you're actually sending a signal up through the vagus nerve, which is connecting your diaphragm up to your brain, that says, I'm safe. I'm okay right now. And then lastly, that puts you in touch with your wise and compassionate brain. And that's the point where that wise inner voice can talk to you. Look, I've been through difficult things before. I can handle this. Let's take this one step at a time. Right now, you're not going to get back to kind of Zen state, but at least you'll be better than you were at the start of the technique. Right.
I really like this, because I think that a lot of people think that they'll be able to relax once their mind settles down. And what you're suggesting is that if you slow the body, the mind will follow.
Yes.
Start with the body and the mind will follow, as opposed to waiting till you actually feel calm to do these things, like in your mind, like just work with the body, and the mind naturally follows.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the other thing is, we're still going to feel anxious. It's okay. It's like fearlessness is not the absence of fear. Fearlessness is the idea that I'm still going to take the appropriate step. I'm still going to advocate for myself. I'm still going to set my boundaries. I'm still going to love myself, even when I'm feeling anxious and scared. Right. And so by doing this, you get better access to your frontal lobe, and you can still take those positive steps. So don't, as Kathleen says, don't wait until you're feeling perfectly calm to do the steps. Just keep kind of faking it till you make it type scenario.
And that acceptance piece is so important too, the acceptance of it all, and holding it all in awareness, as opposed to trying to get rid of it.
Right. And that's what I really, really want to emphasize, is really the acceptance piece is the piece of the Remarkable Cancer Survivors. Okay. So, this feeds right into this next idea is, what's your relationship towards your own stress reaction or towards your own fear? And for most people, they think to themselves, oh, I'm stressed, I'm upset, I'm scared. This is bad. I should avoid this. I need to, manage this. I need a stress reduction course. And it adds a level of kind of fighting against that. And the thought when the anxiety comes in is, this is too much. My life is toxic. I'm not doing this right. So this sends a tension, as opposed to being kind to yourself, like Kathleen's saying, accepting towards yourself, which is paradoxical. You actually feel better and get stronger by being in the more accepting space. So another way to look at this is to change your relationship. Like, think your anxiety has a purpose. It's like a friend that helps you. And so we can accept it, and we can use the energy of the anxiety to do the things that help ourselves, right? So the other way to say it is, my anxiety means that something important is at stake. And you can learn from this, start to trying to unwind as to what the source is. Sometimes the source are distortion. Sometimes the source are real things that you can do something about. Sometimes the source is something you can't do something about, and you let it go, right? But at least you're going to investigate it, and you can always say, I can get stronger from this. I can learn from this. I can grow from this.
So it's really, what you're suggesting is it's belief and attitude too, like what we believe to be true about our feelings, and our attitude that we take towards these feelings will help determine how we cope with them.
Exactly. And it's okay. It's okay to feel anxious. You'll still be able to function, and you'll function better if you can accept it. Okay. So this is next topic is near to dear to both of us. And that is the cognitive behavioral therapy. Essentially this idea that our thoughts influence how I feel. How would you introduce CBT, Kathleen, to
well, I think, just what we were talking about, that a lot of times we focus on behavior or even focus on feelings, but underlying both behavior and feelings is these very well-rooted ideas about the world and our thoughts and how we perceive things. And that's what affects the way we feel. That's what influences our behavior more than anything. So when we look at those and kind of explore deeper, we can kind of we can gain some control, a little bit of control, not as much control as we'd like, but we begin to influence the way we feel and behave.
for certain. And the point is, it's malleable. Our core beliefs are malleable. We create a virtual reality. We can actually change how we look at the world. Or another way to say it is, you can change the game so that you can win. If winning for you is to love that next person coming in the door, then that's your game, and you can win at that game, right? And so focus on the things that you can control. So this is also based on this idea that sometimes, especially when we're stressed, we kind of revert to a kind of more immature or more kind of primitive type of thinking. And this is, again, it's normal. And I'm just going to very quickly go through the distortions, and you can chirp in if you feel. So the all or nothing thinking, like, this day, I stubbed my toe, this day is going to be a bad day. The whole day is going to be a bad day because I stubbed my toe first thing in the morning. So that's a kind of all or nothing type of thinking. And then there's a very long list of generalizations, or it's like not looking at the positive and really looking at the negative. It's like the negativity bias. It's all the same thing, that our brains have been designed to kind of watch out for the dangerous stuff, and we forget about all the good stuff that's happening. So jumping to conclusions, like, if I do this, I know they'll do that, is one of the cognitive distortions. Fortune telling error. Emotional reasoning. So I feel lousy, therefore I have to look at what's causing those emotions. So for instance, I'm nervous for an exam. I mustn't be ready for the exam. I get myself so stressed that I don't do well in the exam, when in fact the truth was I'd actually studied to that point, but because I was nervous, I was telling myself I wasn't ready. So that's an emotional reasoning idea. The should statements are based on societal expectations, or your conditioning, what you've been exposed to throughout your life, your family and your friends, et cetera, et cetera. So we say don't should in yourself is one of the ideas. And that's malleable as well, right? You don't have to choose to follow the societal expectation. You can choose what's right and wise within your own heart. This idea of labeling, right? That guy's an idiot means he's an idiot 100% of the time. There's never an opportunity for him to be anything but an idiot. It would be a distortion of labeling. Medical system sucks would be another one that, if you see that and just believe that all the time. And then personalization is the idea that it's like the me story. It's like, it's like blaming, or it's my responsibility, or blaming others is the other distortion. And I'm sorry we don't have the time to kind of go through this, just to recognize that sometimes we don't think rationally, and that can make us feel worse. And if we can work with the irrational thoughts and change the irrational thoughts, then we would actually feel better. Example of that one is people who are depressed. Oftentimes they have their initial thought, this I'm worthless, or I'm inadequate, or I'm no good. And just those thoughts by themselves make them more depressed. Whereas if we can recognize the truth is each person has this intrinsic beauty and strength, and that is actually the truth. And if we could understand that, we would be less prone to depression.
Rob, could you just clarify a question from one of the members of our audience just asked about the game that you were talking to, and I think that was just an analogy that you had used about changing your attitude and looking at it as like a game.
I'm sorry, I'm speaking a little bit quickly, guys. I apologize. So if you put your energy into, I can only be happy if I know my cancer is not going to come back, then there's this kind of unknown zone, and you can't know if you're going to win that game. If you change your attitude to say, what's most important to me? Well, what's most important to me is that I love other people. And so I've changed the game to say that what I see as success is if I'm able to be loving towards every person in my life, and it doesn't matter which that person is, right? So if I'm in a hospital bed, it could be the cleaning person who comes into the room. I'll love that person, or the nurse that comes in, or the chaplain, or whoever comes into the room. I'll love them, right? And so I've changed the game, the rules of the game, so that I can win at that game. Yeah. I hope that's helpful.
It does. And there was another question too, I think that might relate to what we're talking about here. It was a question about why do you think cancer patients use the term survivor more than any other illness? And do you think using the term survivor can influence the way we think and feel?
That's great. I think it's, it's very individualistic, right? In terms of how we think of that term itself. A strange thing happens to me is I just don't see people as a person with cancer or not cancer. I just see them as a person. I just see them as a spirit. So there's no kind of definition or label. Like, I don't even remember whether, if it's in a social circumstance or in a retreat, I don't know who's has, an advanced cancer or who's just been diagnosed. It's like that person is in that space at that time. And so I don't need to kind of put that kind of survivor label on them. But it's each to his own. It's like, in the same way, I don't like this idea of fighting against cancer, right? And so it's this kind of sense of tension and fight. It's just like being in this space right now is what matters to me. And if that's surviving is a good feeling for you, then you can be a survivor. If this is just like, I'm being here right now, that's great as well. So I'm not sure. What do you think, Kathleen, in terms of survivor versus?
Yeah, no, I like the way that you've phrased that. And I think, yeah, for each individual, it's how that word resonates for them, and whether it makes them feel stronger and empowered, or whether they don't want the label and they would rather just be seen, as you said, like an individual that has their struggles. And yeah.
In the same way, like the couples, right? One of the couples has a cancer diagnosis. The other one doesn't have the cancer diagnosis. I don't call them cancer survivor and caregiver. I just don't like the word caregiver. You could say it's a person who has a cancer diagnosis, has had a cancer diagnosis, and their loved one. I think that's a little bit more, closer to what I like. But even then, it's just like two people in a couple. It doesn't matter who has had the diagnosis. You're still a couple, and you're still connecting and loving and supporting each other, regardless of what roles you play at any point in time. So it's quite malleable, is the way I think about it. Okay, so we're going to go through some of this kind of teaching. It's based on David Byrne's book, Feeling Good. And I'll just give you the quick little overview that we just talked on. You can change the way you think about things, and it works by changing your underlying beliefs. And that will change how you see yourself, you see your life, see others, see the world. And ultimately, you really can feel better. The emotions can be better, your attitude, productivity. Just changing the game, changing your perspective can actually make you feel a whole bunch better, right? So there's the focus, setting the intention. And we use this through a 3-column technique that you can see in the screen here. And you can see up top, there's a situation, which is just the raw reality. And then in the left column, it's called mindful and distressing thoughts. So it's the idea that oftentimes you'll put your thoughts on top of reality. You'll add an interpretation of reality. And especially if those thoughts are distorted or exaggerated, they can make you feel worse than the kind of reality. The reality by itself can have some stress. I'm not minimizing that. It's just that oftentimes we add to it through our distressing thoughts. Mm-hmm. The second column is more like the parental idea of what you can do by deconstructing those thoughts. So we'll go through some examples. And then the third column really represents the wise and compassionate part of your brain. So we acknowledge, we see a bigger perspective, and we're encouraging of oneself. So this is the cognitive therapy piece. And Kathleen and I are going to go through one of these or a couple of these together. So the situation here, can you just read the situation up top to me, Kathleen, please?
Sure. Thinking about an upcoming medical visit.
Right. So you have a cancer diagnosis. You've had a scan. Maybe you're about to go talk to your doctor about the results of the scan, right? So I'm not making any interpretation of that. On top of that, the person thinks to themselves, I can't handle this. This is too much. This is never going to work out. My life is totally out of control, right? So if you're feeling really stressed, you might think this way. And so if we can recognize that we're thinking in an exaggerated way, then we can start to deconstruct it through the second column. So Kathleen, what emotions would follow that way of thinking? If you thought that to yourself, how would you feel emotionally?
Oh, I would just be overwhelmed and feel defeated and feel depressed.
Yeah. Depressed, stressed, yeah.
And very scared.
What kind of reaction do you have in your body when you're starting to think like that?
Well, sadness, of course, and then all this anxiety feelings of fear and tension.
Exactly. So the stress reaction that we were talking about, is it helpful or harmful? Is this helping you think like this?
No, not at all.
how is it exaggerated or how is it irrational? If you were arguing like a lawyer in a court of law, how could you say, well, that's not quite right?
I think this would be maybe an example of one of those catastrophic or thoughts where you're thinking of that there's a worst case scenario that's,
Yeah.
that not looking at the bigger picture.
Right. Exactly. I can't handle this. Well, actually, you are handling this.
Yeah.
This
And
is
it's
too much. Well, go
yeah,
ahead.
a generalization too. My life is totally
Yeah.
out of control. Well, obviously it's not, but that's a big
Right.
sweeping generalization.
Agreed. So you can see how too much never totally are the exaggerations. So then, Kathleen, how would you talk to yourself? If you recognize, oh, I'm thinking like this, how can you kind of be the wise grandmother voice or the wise friend voice? What happens internally?
I think the opposite is just as true, that I can handle this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
can cope with this, and I know it can work out. I've gone through this before, or
Right.
there's more to my life than just this, cancer
Right.
that I'm dealing with. It's not completely out of control, and
Yeah.
really reminding myself and focusing on the things that are within my control and realizing there's a bigger picture,
Yeah. It's
just a
kind of like
small aspect.
being your own best friend,
Yeah,
right? What would your best friends say to you?
you
They
can
would
do it.
say, geez, yeah, you've been through difficult. I mean, I hear that you're hurting. So there's this kind of acknowledgement piece. And no, let's just take this one step at a time. I've seen you do great stuff before, right? So you're being your own best friend.
Mm-hmm.
So we said, right. So the acknowledgement, yeah, I'm a little stressed going in here. This is tough, but there's no use getting worked up, right? So you're using your logic. I can take this one step at a time. I can find the good in each moment, right? I can ask for help. There's lots of ways one could empower oneself, and that gives you a whole different feeling than being scared. Okay, so next one. Can you read the situation?
Hearing someone relapsed.
Right. So it happens, you have a particular type of cancer and you hear some celebrity that had particular type of cancer and their cancer came back. Right. So that could be the situation. Right. So that's a little bit distressing. But then you add on an extra thought that really exaggerates that. Right. So the thought could be something like, if that person's cancer came back, it's going to happen to me too. Right. Yeah. And so if you thought that way, if you're able to hear it, oh, I'm thinking like that, it's going to happen to me too. What emotions would follow that way of thinking?
I think, yeah, again, just feeling sad and defeated and demoralized and helpless.
Right. Yeah. So you're really kind of bringing your energy down. It's not helpful. And so
No.
what's the kind of logical flaw here from the fourth exaggerated irrational?
Again, the generalization, I suppose that just because it happens to somebody that it's going to happen to me, it's
Right.
making that assumption.
Yeah. So a
And
huge fortune teller error
yeah,
in the circumstance. And, the logical thing is, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, I
right.
know that's anxiety provoking just by hearing me say that. But at the same time, if you deal with reality, you have so much more resilience and strength to face whatever situation, including feeling anxious right now. So, so we acknowledge, we look from a bigger perspective, and we're encouraging ourselves. So it is scary. And I don't know what will happen in the future. Worrying is not going to help. I can choose to live my life in the best way possible now, right? So let's make the best out of a difficult situation. And I think that completes yeah. Oh yeah, you actually get this is wonderful. So can you please summarize? This is the RULE tool, because this is what help people to recognize when their thoughts are gone astray.
Yeah,
So
when we were talking about distortions, this was a tool that had been introduced to me a long time ago, which I still use to this day all the time. But so the R essentially stands for, am I being realistic? Am I putting unrealistic expectations on myself or other people? And so just to ask yourself that question, especially if you find yourself getting distressed about something, to check your thinking and ask yourself if this thinking is based on maybe an unrealistic expectation. The U stands for, is this useful? So just stopping for a moment and asking yourself the very question that you mentioned, like, is this helping me?
Mm,
Does this serve me well, to
yes.
continue to think these thoughts, or is it only
Mm,
doing me a
it's
disservice
winding me
by
up.
making me more
Yeah.
stressed? Yeah, winding me up. The
That's
L
the
is
real important. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and the L is this logical? So if I ran this by Rob or I ran this by Ellie, would
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
look at the situation and agree with me, or would they see it differently? And would they be able to see the irrationality in it? Probably. So that's a good way to check that. And then the
Yeah.
last one,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I'm just saying the logical. I mean, if that person's cancer comes back, then mine's going to too. Well, we
Hmm.
ran that past somebody else. They said, well, how can you make that assumption? Right. That's not
Yeah.
logical.
Yeah. And the E standing for is there, where's the evidence? So a lot of times we engage in fantasy thoughts, and there is no evidence to support it at all. There's no evidence that we're faced with to support that, but our minds can just be really imaginative and creative and think up all sorts of things where there's no evidence at all. So yeah,
Mm,
that was a tool that I wanted to share myself because I thought it's been really helpful for me, and I still use it.
mm, sweet. And powerful too. So Kathleen, do we want to spend a few minutes on self-compassion, or do we want to jump over to Q&A?
I think that, because we're not going to be cut off right away at 3:30, so why don't we spend a few minutes on self-compassion?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, because we've been talking about this idea, um, and I'm basing my work and my teaching here on Christian Neff's work. Wonderful, wonderful book called Self-Compassion, The Proven Power of Being Kind to Yourself. And oftentimes we hear self-compassion, we hear wimpy, weak, et cetera, et cetera. And we could have a long conversation as to why self-compassion is not that. So for instance, the compassionate parent, when the 8-year-old child says, Mom, I don't want to go to school today, I just want to eat ice cream instead, the compassionate mother doesn't say, no problem, dear. The compassionate mother says, sorry, honey, it's really important to go to school and you have to eat your veggies first before you have your dessert, right? So there's a sense of strength to self-compassion as well. But there's really actually very strong research showing that when we're compassionate to ourselves, when we have that kind of strong compassion, people actually have less anxiety, depression, and stress. They have all these kind of less, and they're happier, they're more satisfied, they're more optimistic, they're more likely to actually take care of themselves when you have that kind of sense of kindness towards oneself and others, to advocate for themselves in the medical system, better adapting. Their partners will relate them as better partners, right? More giving and understanding and so on. And I think this is the takeaway, is that you can actually train through a self-compassionate technique, and ultimately it will change your brain and change how you perceive the world. So less depression, anxiety, stress, and emotional avoidance, right? So you actually still want to do the tough thing and advocate for yourself and so on. So there's just the kind of giving you a little taste of that one. And I want to kind of describe the elements of self-compassion. So it's the same compassion and care we give to a good friend,
Mhm.
right? So why don't we treat ourselves as we would treat a wonderful friend? And the three elements are mindfulness. Like if you're walking down the street and you see somebody who lives on the street, how would you actually have a sense of compassion for that person? First of all, you have to notice that they're suffering. We notice that we're suffering ourselves. Being moved, so the sense of kind of heartfulness. We see that they're suffering, and therefore our heart is open in response to their pain. And lastly, this is very important, is we realize that this journey is a shared human experience. But for the grace of God, there go I, right? So this is natural human stuff that we all run into. So having that kind of sense of could be me. So I want to do a self-compassion ritual, and I'd ask you to stand up right now and put your hands over your heart. Just a sense of kindness. So what do you feel when you do this? It's kind of a loving, soothing, self-compassionate pose. And also then I want you to put your hands down at your sides, kind of like a karate stance, and have, this is also self-compassion, right? The willingness to stand up for yourself and to be strong. So self-compassion has both those components. Wonderful. Thank you. Then come on down. Okay, so the last visualization, I'm going to actually take you through a self-compassion break, right? So when you're in the midst of, something that's very stressful, maybe you're having a fear of cancer recurrence flare, or the anxiety is kind of coming up in mind, or maybe you're walking into your medical appointment. I want you to visualize that. And you say to yourself, okay, the mindfulness piece has happened, right? I see it. I see that I'm suffering there. So you say to yourself, this is a moment of suffering, right? I'm suffering, I'm hurting. And you don't like the word suffering because it sounds too melodramatic. There's lots of different other ways to say that, like, oh, ouch, or this hurts, or this is stressful. And recognize how my voice has changed right now. Do you hear the compassion in my voice? It's not just, just saying those words, like feeling it. Oh, this is tough, right? So you recognize it, you accept it. Secondly, you can say to yourself something like, suffering is part of life. This is part of the human journey. When your perception goes from, this is my pain, to, oh, this is what people go through, this is the pain, it becomes easier to accept. So other ways to say that are something like, other people feel this way. I'm not alone. We all struggle in our lives, right? So accepting the kind of humanness of your journey and the interrelatedness. And lastly, you say to yourself, by putting your hands on your heart, gentle touch, you say to yourself something like, may I be kind to myself. But depending on the situation, you choose what that affirmation may be. It may be something like, may I give myself the compassion that I need. May I accept myself, or may I learn to accept myself, or may I forgive myself. May I be strong. You could actually ask for strength. May I be patient, right? So you're applying what you need in the circumstance to get you through that difficult moment. I guess I'm into a last plug. So thanks, Kathleen. You're able to really feel that. It's wonderful. So we have a book at our on our website. You can see that there, healingandcancer.org. It's the teachings from an entire weekend retreat. In fact, we did a few in Winnipeg. In fact, we probably would have videotaped one there. And every second chapter is a story of somebody who's attended the retreat.
It's a wonderful book. I do have a copy here in our library. So there we go.
Circle.
It's a beautiful book and inspiring stories in it as well. We do have a few questions, Rob, for you that if we can go to right now, if that's okay.
Please,
somebody just had a note, though, that there's some good self-compassion literature available in the public library.
Nice.
So that's good to know that there's those resources. Someone else just had made a comment about having a friend that's been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer and the fear of their own cancer coming back. And also there's a feeling of guilt that this person has cancer and their cancer is in remission.
Yeah. Those are all natural things, right? So we all have triggers. If you hear somebody else gets a cancer diagnosis, that can kind of suddenly bring the kind of possibilities of what might happen in the future as well. So normal, natural, there's going to be an ebb and flow of anxiety with time. And yes, I've also heard this often of this, I have an early cancer. My friend has a very advanced cancer. I feel really guilty that I'm doing well. And I guess the advice, if there's any advice to be had, is just that we all are going to struggle. We all are going to have difficulties. And so we don't have to kind of compare, I'm only suffering this much, they're suffering that much. It's not fair. It's like, no, we're all doing our work to be as loving and caring and, bringing our best self in the world as possible. So, yeah.
There was a comment just from somebody about the science behind cussing. I think I know which documentary on Netflix this is about, but I haven't seen it, but apparently it suggests that that this can help relieve stress and pain. So have you heard that?
No, do you know what? So thank you. I really appreciate that. And I will read that. I will give you this analogy is in nature, for instance, the deer escapes from the wolf and deer runs away, gets away. They know they're safe and they go into a pasture in some safe spot. And then they kind of shake off all that tension.
Right.
We humans don't do that very much, right? Is to kind of shake off the tension. And I'm also thinking about, cussing as you kind of, I don't like this. This was difficult, And so I see that as kind of healthy as that kind of release of the stress. I do worry that it can turn into a blame game, right? This shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have acted that way. All the kind of shoulds that can come out through a cussing process.
Right.
And so it's that balancing act of being able to discharge the stress and at the same time is to be able to the starting point is acceptance. This is the truth of what's happening. How do I take my next step forward from this truth, this reality? And so I just worry about this kind of tension of struggling against reality.
Somebody had a question about what can they do for their family to calm their family's anxieties about fear of recurrence when they themselves also worry about it.
Yeah. And so this is so important is that we do our own work, right? So that we become comfortable as possible because it's not going to be perfect. We become as comfortable as possible with the worst case scenarios. And it sounds like an awful thing to kind of go through, but if you actually explore your fears and go deeper to try to see what scares you, you can actually dissipate the fear, right? And if you can come to that level and then even just share that with your family, then, if they see that you're comfortable with the unknown, then they become more and more comfortable with the unknown.
Yeah.
Quick story. I was at the bedside of one of my patients many years ago, and she said to me, "Doc, I know my cancer is really bad, but don't tell my husband, he can't handle it." And then I'm walking down the hallway, and I get pulled into the kind of side room by the husband. The husband says, "Doc, I know my wife's cancer is bad, but don't tell her that she has cancer. She can't handle it." Type thing. And so oftentimes we create these kind of silos of, trying to protect the other person when the best thing I think is to be vulnerable and open, just totally truthful all the time. It's just the best way to kind of collapse all these extra have to protect my family members.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, do you think there's a lot of pressure on cancer patients to be positive, to be optimistic, to not show fear? Like that there's this thought that that they should use all this positive psychology and face it all positively and feel not show their fear.
I'm just imagining the people that are listening right now are just like squirming in their chairs. The point is it's unrealistic. Right? Who stays positive 100% of the time? And so therefore we're struggling to put on the happy mask for others. It just doesn't work. It just is not possible to stay positive all the time. So we should just kind of let go of it from that perspective. And therefore what I've been trying to advocate is that we're authentic. And authenticity means authentic with ourselves too. I mean, when we're scared, we say, yes, I'm feeling scared now. When we're happy, we say, I feel happy. Whatever's coming up is we claim those emotions, allow those emotions to go through us. And so we say, don't suppress, meaning, oh, no, I can't be scared, nor act out, which is, yell at people or be mean or, like dramatize or catastrophize. It's just like allowing things to be as they are and they can kind of flow through you more easily. And so, it's impossible. And it's almost like it's really important to have those conversations with the family members to say, I want everyone to be vulnerable and authentic in a positive way. So.
Right. And somebody did ask too about how they can maybe engage their partner to listen more. And when you're saying that it's important for cancer patients to share, what if someone in their life isn't a good listener?
Listener, yeah. Sometimes they're not going to be a good listener. Unfortunately, is the kind of sad part. But you can give them a try. And this is what I recommend: is go to your partner and say to them, I really need something from you. It's this: I want you just to listen to me right now. I don't want you to try to correct me. I don't want you to offer me advice, and allowing me just to tell you how I feel is actually going to be a huge therapy for me, be a huge favor for me. Are you in agreement with trying to do that? And they can actually, you can try that scenario. So it's like setting up the expectation, setting the culture within that conversation or within the relationship, so that person knows how you want them to respond.
Nice. This is more of a medical question, and you may not be able to answer this right now, but I did want to ask it. What does it mean to be HER2 negative without having the option of hormonal therapy such as tamoxifen to assist with prevention of reoccurrence?
Right. So the person is describing a breast cancer situation in which the cancer cells don't have any of these little hormone receptors, so they can't have the hormone treatment. And at the same time, they don't have the bad gene within the cancer cell called HER2. So it's what they call triple negative disease. And so the idea is to try to cure that person with chemotherapy, that can sterilize any cancer cells that might be left behind. So I just give you the general impression of that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we still have time if there's some more questions. I did have a request to show the John Lennon quote again. So I actually do have the whole quote. I'll just bring that up if I can share my screen right now and do that. Let's see if I can.
Kathleen, while you're bringing that up, maybe we can also read. Oh, good. There's more to it. Great. Fantastic. Yes, I see it.
Did you want to read it out, Rob? The whole
Sure.
quote?
There are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. When we are afraid, we pull back from life. When we are in love, we open to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first. Sounds like a little bit of self-compassion there. In all our glory and imperfections. It's both glory and imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in fearlessness. Fearlessness is not an absence of fear, by the way, folks. Did I say that? An open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. Right. Wow.
Yeah.
John Lennon, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, and I just also, while we have a chance to, there are some new books in our library, and I'll just maybe share those as well, so that as apart from Rob's book that you see on the right there.
Yeah, thank you. So sweet.
Yeah, these are the other books that we have here are all books that are, kind of along the lines of what Rob has described in terms of integrated mind-body approaches to healing and recovery. Most of them are cancer specific. One is more focused on visualization. Most of them written by health professionals. The one in the center written from a person is sort of his own sort of biographical account of his journey. Yeah. So I just wanted to share those two, and those are available for lending if anyone's interested.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Maybe I can flash one more slide.
Great.
Just because I want to make sure we get people the contact information here. So there's the phone number to the Patient and Family Support Resource Team Center. Yep. And so please, anybody in Manitoba, give them a shout. There's so much good stuff that you can kind of tap into, right? And then you have the healingandcancer.org website. There's a lot of free talks and videos.
There's great stuff on your website, Rob. Tons of videos and really great skills that you're teaching there.
Thank you.
Yeah, super. So if there's no other questions, I did want to just take this moment to really thank Rob for being with us today. It's like I said, it's been a long-awaited presentation, and you've offered some great techniques and concepts that I think can really help transform the cancer journey into one of personal growth. And I mean, that's I think ultimately what we all hope to achieve is just to continue to grow and learn
and that can help you incredibly physically as well, so it can do all the above. So
that's right. And there's a lot of great evidence for that in terms of how that can help us physically. So and for those of you joining us, we really appreciate you taking the time, and we'd like to hear your feedback, so there will be a survey at the end of the webinar, and we invite you to complete that as well. And yeah, I'm sad that it's come to an end, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I can accept that.
Yeah, exactly. It's okay to be sad.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
Rob,
Thanks, Ali,
very
in the
much.
background. Take care,
Yeah. Thank
everybody.
you, Allie. Yeah. Take care.